Alright, folks, let's unpack the meteoric rise of China's new head honcho, Premier Li Qiang. How did this guy get on Xi Jinping's good side, who, let's face it, isn't exactly the easiest guy to impress? Li Qiang went from being a local official to steering the whole Chinese ship. And get this, he was the mastermind behind convincing Elon Musk to set up Tesla's Gigafactory right in Shanghai's backyard. Talk about a game changer. This move didn't just shake up the electric car scene in China. It catapulted the country to the #1 spot in the global race for new energy vehicles. Starting off as just a secretary, will Li Qiang end up as one of the Chinese Communist Party's heavy hitters, or is he going to flip the script with a whole new leadership vibe? Stay tuned to find out.
I ask that you swear the oath.
I swear to be loyal to the Constitution of the People's Republic of China.
On March 11th, at the 4th plenary meeting of the first session of the 14th National People's Congress at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, Li Qiang was successfully elected as the new premier of the State Council.
And to be loyal to the people, and to perform my duty with the utmost respect and prudence.
This phrase is really a mouthful once you start trying to read it out loud. The 4th plenary meeting of the first session of the 14th National People's Congress. Anyway, that's what it's called, so it's not like we have a choice.
For a country that is wealthy and powerful, democratic, civilized, and harmonious, a breathtaking and modern socialist power, I will strive and struggle arduously. I, Li Qiang, take this oath.
It should be said that Li Qiang's election as the premier of the State Council at this National People's Congress is not surprising, but there are still some aspects worth paying attention to. First and foremost, the most important point is that Li Qiang's election on March 11th went differently from the election of Xi Jinping and Han Zheng the day before, because Xi Jinping, Han Zheng, and Wang Huning all had something in common during the election a few days ago. They were all elected unanimously without any opposing votes or abstentions. Throughout the entire day of the election process, only the vice chairman of the National People's Congress, Li Hongzhong, had a single vote against him. However, Li Qiang, who was elected as the premier of the State Council, had 3 opposing votes and 8 abstentions. Think about it, it's a stark contrast from the previous day, but I think it's actually quite smart. What's the point of having so many supporting votes? To be honest, it won't change the election results at all, even if there are opposing votes. Will it really make you lose the election? Not a chance. However, if the result is 29-52 votes in favor, 0 votes against, and 0 abstentions, it doesn't actually make people feel that you have received unanimous support from all representatives. On the contrary, it makes people feel like no one dared to vote against you. Of course, that could very well be true, because the National People's Congress elections have also had some reforms in recent years. The candidates' names on the ballot are printed for you in advance. For example, the candidate for the president of the country, Xi Jinping, and the candidate for the chairman of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, Wang Huning, have already been set as the default choice on the ballot. This means that if you support these candidates, you don't need to write anything down. But if you want to vote against or abstain, you got to get up and go over to that spot up front where there's a voting booth. It's a secret booth, so you can write in private and then cast your vote. But hey, have you seen that voting scene? Basically, everyone just comes out of their seats in order and goes over to vote. So who's going to walk up to that secret ballot spot and cast a vote? That's really eye-catching. Who would have the balls to do that? Once they go over there, everyone will know that they went to cast a vote against Chairman Xi Jinping. You see all those armed police standing over there? They ain't going to grab you on the spot, but they sure will clean up afterwards. So like, for real, no one dares to vote against him in the actual meeting. But even though no one dares to cast an opposing vote on the scene, you can't make it seem like everyone is too afraid to vote. All their propaganda basically says that nobody wants to go against us, but they are making it seem like everyone is still voting based on their true intentions. That's clever. What's the big deal if you got a few votes against you? When Jiang Zemin was elected as the president of China, didn't he face dozens of opposing votes? He was in power for 10 years and everything was just fine. Didn't Hu Jintao also get some opposing votes when he was elected? Why does Xi Jinping have to be elected without a single vote in opposition, in my opinion? That ain't smart and it ain't clever. They really brought the fear that exists within the government to life through this vote. The elections are not about widespread public support, but it really feels like no one on the scene has the guts to cast a dissenting vote. So, in my opinion, the propaganda department should really take a good look at this. Don't show the true grim face of the party. Even though the operation behind the scenes is downright brutal, on the surface it's got to give off a peaceful vibe. Now that's what I call clever, right? The Communist Party should take a good look at our channel. It'll help them do better in the future, especially those big shots from the propaganda department, right? All right, folks, let's get down to today's business and talk about the new Premier Li Qiang. Before Li Qiang took office, a lot of folks were predicting it was going to happen because he is the new premier. There's a lot of analysis on him. Many folks think Li Qiang isn't too educated because he started working at an agricultural machinery station when he was 17. After the college entrance exam was reinstated, he got into a school to study agricultural machinery. I guess you could say his educational background wasn't all that great. So a lot of folks are saying he ain't got no skills, he's just a lackey. But I don't think so. Personally, I reckon education is just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to kickstarting your career. It's one very important consideration, but once a person reaches a certain level of competence, their level of education doesn't matter much anymore. For example, Steve Jobs dropped out of college and went on to co-found Apple. Can't say he's not capable, can ya? In my opinion, education is an important consideration in the process of selecting talent from the masses. But when it comes down to the individual, education really isn't that important. Some folks can pull stuff off even with no degrees. Let me give you a basic example. Chairman Mao never went to a big fancy college. He just was the librarian at Peking University. I think Mao is pretty capable even though his education ain't great. So I reckon education and ability ain't exactly proportional. When it comes to this Li Qiang fella, I checked out his resume and I gotta say, he's got some promise. Li Qiang was born into a farmer family in Rui'an, Zhejiang after graduating from college. He started out as the Communist Youth League secretary and then worked his way up to become the secretary of the Wenzhou Municipal Party Committee. He eventually became the Secretary General of the provincial government. Then he happened to meet Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping was transferred from the position of governor of Fujian to become the party secretary of Zhejiang province at the time. It's said that Xi Jinping really took a liking to him during this process. Li Qiang comes from a background in secretarial work. People with a background as a secretary tend to be good at guessing their leaders' intentions. At the same time, with high emotional intelligence, they don't excessively fight for acknowledgement from their leaders, but still do a good job. I saw reports saying that Li Qiang often worked late into the night back then. Xi Jinping sometimes got off work late in the provincial party committee building, and often saw Li Qiang still working. So Li Qiang himself is very much appreciated. Later, Xi Jinping served as the secretary of the Municipal Party Committee in Shanghai and then became a member of the Politburo Standing Committee in Beijing. In 2012, when he became the boss, the first thing he did was move Li Qiang from the position of deputy secretary of the Provincial Party Committee to become the governor of Zhejiang province. After serving as governor for 3 years, he was transferred to Jiangsu province to serve as the provincial party secretary. After spending some time in Jiangsu province, he was transferred to Shanghai to serve as the secretary of the municipal party committee. So Li Qiang became the only big shot in Chinese politics to have run the show in Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and Shanghai. Pretty impressive, right? These three places are rather special. They're the wealthiest provinces in China. What sets these wealthy provinces apart is that their private economy is pretty darn developed, and the government officials are relatively more open-minded. So Li Qiang worked in Shanghai for a total of 5 years. While in Shanghai, he managed to pull off two really big things. First off, back in the day, handling business online in Shanghai was pretty tough because all over the country, government departments were promoting this whole integrated approach to serving the public. Like when I went back to China last year, I went to Luoyang to handle some business. Luoyang has just built this place called the Citizens Home, which is like the go-to spot for all residents to deal with government stuff. It's all tucked away in this building. So all interactions you need to have with the government for any reason can all be handled here, and they are being promoted on a wide scale. So there's this whole online thing where you can take care of all your government business in one fell swoop. It's called the integrated handling of official business or something like that. When Li Qiang took office, Shanghai's ranking in this area was only 15th, but after he showed up, within a year it shot up to #1 nationwide. The public services in Shanghai are really top-notch, better than anywhere else in the country. This is one thing he accomplished. The second thing is he successfully brought Tesla into Shanghai and built Tesla's first overseas gigafactory there. This actually ain't all that easy, to be honest. When Tesla was all gung-ho about breaking into overseas markets, they first set their sights on China. Because, I mean, in regards to the Chinese government, they straight up call it the economic monster. China was also investing a lot in foreign businesses, especially in key service sectors. There's no other country in the world that compares. The conditions are just too good. So, you see, Airbus, Samsung, and basically all the big companies around the world have their factories set up in China. The Chinese government is doing the best job in the world in serving capitalists. So Tesla was like, let's build the first gigafactory in China. At that time, there was a lot of competition across the country for the Tesla gigafactory. Guangzhou had even got the land all sorted out and zoned off. Suzhou, Tianjin, and Beijing were all looking to bring Tesla into their respective areas. Tesla building a mega factory that'll churn out at least 500,000 cars a year would spark the development of the whole new energy industry. That's why a lot of local governments were itching to bring Tesla in. But there's a catch. Tesla has put forward two conditions. The first condition is that it must be a sole proprietor and can't have a joint venture with China. The second condition is they must be treated as a Chinese enterprise. Neither of these is a walk in the park. When China first joined the WTO as an independent entity, there was a negotiation condition regarding the automotive industry. All foreign manufacturers in the Chinese market had to form joint ventures with Chinese car makers. The second thing is that the shareholding ratio must not exceed 50%, but Tesla is a beast, so it requested sole ownership. At that time, it just so happened that the US and China were in the midst of a trade war, with Trump squaring off against China every day. Trump was arguing that in the Chinese car market, foreign companies are forced to form joint ventures with the Chinese, which is unfair. At that time, Musk was also complaining online every day, like all the time. He was saying things like American cars entering the Chinese market have to pay a hefty 25% tariff, while Chinese cars coming into the US only face a 2.5% tariff. No American factory in China has more than 50% ownership stake, and in the US there are already 6 car companies from China that have a 100% market share. Overall, the inequality and unfairness were causing both sides to go at it like there's no tomorrow. Finally, the Chinese government's attitude softened up. So there are 2 exceptions in the issue of the shareholding ratio in the automotive industry. One being that new energy vehicles may be exempt from the 50% shareholding ratio requirement, and the policy window for special vehicles has now opened. As for his other requests, it essentially refers to how China has some national subsidy programs for the new energy vehicle industry. So when regular folks buy a car, if they go for a domestic electric vehicle, they get some subsidies. Tesla insisted that if you buy a Tesla, you should get the same benefits. Later on, both of these issues were sorted out. Afterward, all the local governments were competing with each other, trying their hardest to get Tesla to come set up shop. Li Qiang was in charge of Shanghai at the time, and he really went all out to give Tesla the green light to start up in Shanghai by creating a series of favorable policies. First off, we've got the site itself. In Shanghai, everyone knows that every inch of land is worth its weight in gold. Also, the land area occupied by the construction of a superfactory is massive. The Shanghai city government was shelling out at about $1,100 per square meter. Tesla was able to snag a whopping 800,000 square meters of land. That's big as 2,100 basketball courts. Shanghai land is so expensive, it's like giving it away for free at 100 yuan per square meter. The total price of the land adds up to less than 1 billion. Second, they offered a super sweet interest rate of 3.9% for loans. In other words, Tesla doesn't need to spend a dime of its own money. The Shanghai government gave them a loan and land to build the factory. After construction, they even helped find workers. Afterward, Tesla could get rolling. But the Shanghai government did throw out a few conditions. The first requirement is that Tesla must invest over 14 billion yuan domestically in the next 5 years. Second, after the end of 2023, the annual tax payment to the Shanghai municipal government must not be less than 23 billion. Third, Tesla's gigafactory in China must achieve 100% localization within 3 years. Tesla just went ahead and agreed to everything, almost like taking a bet. If the agreement can't be fulfilled, the Shanghai city government has the right to take back the land for Tesla's Gigafactory. You could say that it's a win-win. The Shanghai government was all about giving Tesla the green light. Every time Musk rolled into town, Li Qiang was there to greet him. Even during the pandemic, when Musk couldn't make it, Li Qiang had a video conference with him. Every time Tesla's factory starts or finishes a production run, high-ranking officials from the Shanghai municipal government attend. And throughout the whole construction process, they've managed to work some magic. From breaking ground on January 7th, 2019, to rolling out the first complete vehicle on December 30th, 2019, it took less than 12 months. That's right. A super factory went from nothing to a fully assembled car in under a year. Some folks call this speed Shanghai speed. Some people call it Tesla speed, but it's definitely not Tesla speed, because Tesla has built a second Gigafactory overseas in Germany. Everyone, take a look at how much time it took from the start of production to the final assembly of the whole vehicle over there. Musk is having a rough time because even after completing the construction, those environmental groups keep suing him every day. So it was a long process to start production. But when the Chinese government says jump, these things just don't exist. So Shanghai really left a big impression on Musk. And from the fact that Tesla is in Shanghai, you can see that Li Qiang is the kind of guy who's always been focused on economic development first and foremost. He's always thinking about how to serve those big shot capitalists. In China, if we treat the capitalists right, the GDP will just shoot up. Once you've got employment, then you've got taxes coming in, the people's lives will also get better, etc. Second, you got to embrace the market economy and continue to carry out reforms and open up during this process. So why do officials from Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and Shanghai have relatively open-minded thoughts on commercialization? It's all about the positive feedback they've been getting from the market economy for a long time. It's like the better the market economy does, the more money the government has, and the wealthier the people are. That's just the way it goes. So in my opinion, when it comes to evaluating government officials in the Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and Shanghai area, their educational background really isn't that important, because I've done interviews in Jiangsu and I've done a bunch of interviews in Zhejiang too. I've had contact with government officials from both places, and overall they seem pretty open and quite competent. This is just how I feel, you know? So, what's Li Qiang's game plan for the next 5 years as Prime Minister? What kind of challenges is he looking at? Today, for the first time as the Premier of the State Council, Li Qiang was interviewed by both domestic and foreign journalists. Let's break it down by taking a look at the press conference. First off, I gotta say, the questions from the reporters were pretty interesting. You can see that none of the big Western media outlets like CNN, Associated Press, or the Wall Street Journal were there. Including Japan's NHK and Kyodo News, none of them got a chance to ask questions. Apart from CCTV, Xinhua News Agency, People's Daily, the paper, and Phoenix TV, only these few Chinese media outlets were involved, and the rest are mainly 3 foreign ones. There's this one from America, but it's geared towards finance. The other 2 are pretty interesting. One is a newspaper from Uzbekistan. I looked it up, seems like it's controlled by the government in Uzbekistan, and very pro-China. Their website even has a Chinese language option to choose from. The other one's called Chinese Arabic Television, which is kind of interesting. Their headquarters is actually financed and operated by Chinese investors in Dubai. They also work with the royal family of the United Arab Emirates. I reckon behind the scenes, everything is probably run by Chinese funding, and its operations center is in China too. So on the surface, it looks like a foreign media outlet, but it's actually controlled by the Chinese government, which lets them ask some pretty sharp questions and control the narrative. So you see, all the questions at the press briefing were totally planned in advance. But from what I can tell, in the whole questioning process, Li Qiang didn't read from a script and didn't have a little notebook prepared or anything. Overall, his responses were pretty steady and fairly candid. He actually dropped a couple wisdom bombs.
In the historical process of achieving the second centenary goals, I believe we must be constantly revolutionizing and continue to walk the path of opening up and further build a business environment that's market-oriented, rule of law-based, and internationalized, while also treating all types of enterprises equally, protecting the property rights of businesses and the interests of entrepreneurs in accordance with the law, promoting fair competition among various types of business entities, and supporting the growth and development of private enterprises. Speaking of this, it reminds me of the 1980s and 1990s, back in my dear homes of Zhejiang and Jiangsu. Back in the day, when we were trying to develop private businesses and village enterprises, I remember the business mindset and spirit we had put forward and eventually forged. That is, leaving no stone unturned, brainstorming every possible idea, articulating every thought and word, and enduring every hardship and adversity.
The core of this press briefing, in my opinion, boils down to two things. First things first, he wants to give the economy a boost. The second is a commitment to firmly stick to the path of reform and opening up. He tried to label it as putting the people's interests at the core. That's just a load of baloney. What he really wants to convey are just these 2 points. Undoubtedly, economic development is the most crucial aspect of this administration. To achieve his economic goals, he talked about the need to firmly support and encourage private enterprises to develop together in various fields. His attitude towards the relationship between the US and China is also kind of chill, relatively speaking. On the other hand, people like Li Qiang can say some tough stuff like, the times of not fighting back and not talking back are over. He wouldn't even repeat it after. He just goes on a rant saying, I'm not going to say those same words again. There are common interests between China and the US, and we can't just split apart. And decoupling is not realistic, and it's not good for either side, and so on. So relatively speaking, Li Qiang is kind of mild. He also didn't really say anything about the Taiwan issue, just laid out some general principle-based measures. As the Premier of the State Council, he can't really control Taiwan policy anyway, so he won't speak up so easily. Overall, he's quite moderate and by the book, but actually, there are a lot of issues still. He brought up a concept called the talent dividend. But there's a difference between the so-called talent dividend and what's called the demographic dividend. When we talk about the demographic dividend, there are 2 different layers of meaning to it. The first layer is that the population itself is a constant source of labor that can be supplied to the market. But on the flip side, there is something even more important about the population dividend, and that is demand. Because with people comes demand. When demand and supply come together, that's when the economy really starts to kick into high gear and grow. But if the population decreases dramatically, first off, it means that demand will have gone down. Demand goes down, so production would slow, and then folks might not be needed to work. So the demographic dividend isn't just about having more labor capacity, but when Li Qiang was answering questions, he only emphasized the upgrading and replacement of labor as a capital asset, without mentioning the demographic dividend at all. After a decline in demand, he didn't talk about the challenges which would then be facing the whole economy. Also, and when he was talking about the pandemic situation, he used what you might call a so-called valid argument, saying, we made the right decisions at the right time. Of course, I get it. I mean, he's the Premier of the State Council, so he's got to talk like that, right? The final question is whether Li Qiang will become the weakest Premier, because some people say, look, Xi Jinping now has unchecked power and nothing can hold him back. And Li Qiang is another one of those people who started out as a secretary and never really was able to spread his own wings. In front of Xi Jinping, you bet your bottom dollar that he's going to be walking on eggshells. So, will anyone feel like he has any impact? Will he have any power to make independent decisions? In my opinion, it might not necessarily be the case. Everybody knows that last year, during Li Qiang's administration in Shanghai, the city got hit with a lockdown in April. Back in the day, it was Sun Chunlan calling the shots in Shanghai, demanding that the city had to be locked down. Li Qiang really didn't stand up to him. To be honest, the word on the street is that Li Qiang didn't really want to lock down Shanghai at first. But later, when Sun Chunlan took charge in Shanghai and demanded a lockdown, he just went along with it. So, looking at the 2-month tragedy in Shanghai, it's clear that Li Qiang isn't exactly a stickler for principles. He may not necessarily agree with the lockdown deep down, but by having Sun Chunlan represent the State Council to oversee and command the epidemic prevention situation in Shanghai, he's essentially still abiding by it. If he's like that as Prime Minister, he really won't have much of a presence. But everyone can take a look at this one Reuters article talking about how China's dynamic zero COVID policy was cancelled, and Li Qiang apparently played a big role. Why is that? Well, it's because Li Qiang took over as the new leader of the COVID-19 Prevention and Control Group after the 20th National Congress in October, reporting directly to the members of the Politburo Standing Committee. Later on, he formulated 20 measures for epidemic control and prevention. When these were first established, Xi Jinping was still somewhat hesitant. And at such a critical moment of uncertainty, Li Qiang stuck to his own approach. Later on, when the whole big reopening started, the initial policy was still to stick to keeping nucleic acid testing. However, Li Qiang insisted that it was unnecessary. So this report says that Li Qiang actually played a crucial role when the dynamic zero COVID policy was lifted. After this article was published, some people also raised some doubts about its credibility. But no matter what, it should be said that Li Qiang does actually have a say in the decision-making process of Xi Jinping. The big difference here is that Li Qiang is actually Xi's own guy, whereas others like Li Qiang don't really have that kind of connection with Xi. Xi Jinping didn't trust Li Qiang at the time, so he set up various small groups outside the State Council to sideline him. But Li Qiang is pretty close to Xi Jinping, so he doesn't feel the need to sideline or guard against him. Second, he can actually listen to what Li Qiang has to say at a critical moment, because if he trusts a person, he'll listen to whatever this person says. If he doesn't trust someone, even if what this person says is correct, it's still wrong. That's a characteristic unique to an authoritarian regime. So, in my opinion, Li Qiang may actually have a bigger role in some key decision-making processes than Li Qiang did, simply because he has gained high trust and recognition from Xi Jinping. Actually, Li Qiang becoming the premier also means that Xi Jinping is officially entering his own personal era of full-on governance. If you ask me, Li Qiang wasn't exactly living his dream as the premier of the State Council in the past 10 years. So Li Qiang's team right now is likely to be completely made up of people just like him. So in the next 5 to 10 years, a team like Li Qiang's may fully implement Xi Jinping's governing policies and roadmap. Li Qiang himself, however, is basically more inclined to focus on economic development and improving the quality of its infrastructure. At the same time, he insists on continuing with reforms and opening up to dispel the uncertainties about the development of the Chinese economy over the past 2 years, which have arisen from concerns during the epidemic period. This includes those regarding private enterprises and foreign investment. As for whether he can pull this off, we don't know for sure. Because in the long run, if you want to ensure the development of the private economy and guarantee a favorable investment environment for foreign capital in China, the more important thing is to rely on the construction of a legally bound environment. The government must follow the law, so private enterprises, including foreign-funded ones, can truly receive legal protection. But actually, in China, this concept simply doesn't exist. But we can't deny that if government officials show some respect for the market economy in the short term and for market entities, then these market-driven private enterprises, as well as foreign-invested enterprises, could indeed see some development during certain periods. So, will Li Qiang's team take the lead to drive the further development of the entire Chinese economy in the next 5 years? Well, just have to wait and see what stands the test of time. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you, everyone.